Good morning. Welcome to today's class. My name is Jon Witt, and this is my son Noah. And this is a Hatha 1 class. So I'm creating base level classes so that they can help you in becoming a healthy practitioner. You won't need a lot of equipment. I'm going to be doing mostly stuff on the floor today. So if there's things that you just can't do, there's always other forms of practice. So if I had an injury, I'd have a very specific practice, and then once I got over that injury, then I could be able to do more things. And it's just a matter of being a little bit more strategic about an injury. So if there was something that was irritating you, if you let me know, I could create a more simplistic practice for you. And like I said, over time, I really believe that people can get healthier, and then you could be more sufficient in practice. So I'm going to start on the floor, and when you start on the floor, you may want to have just a higher surface to sit on. So I'm not going to sit on anything, but I'm going to sit in a cross-legged position. So when I'm sitting cross-legged, I'm trying to squeeze my legs into the middle, and by squeezing my legs in, I'm going to strengthen my adductors. And when I'm pushing my legs apart, it's strengthening the rotators. Both are needed. And it looks, when you look at someone sitting, with the exception of meditation, it just looks like they're just sitting, which is some of that. But I'm actively trying to get my legs to be stronger, and as I'm using my legs, it's the more you stretch out your hips, the more you'll stretch out the upper body. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to glide my rib cage in a sideway motion. So make it really small. And then as you're moving your ribs and you're gliding your ribs, what you're doing is that you're moving your thoracic. So let's say you have quite a bit of stiffness, you're going to see everything kind of move in one piece, which is perfectly fine. But then as you get more mobility in the tissue, you'll be able to move more independently through the upper body. So not that you have to move super, super slow or small, but that's how you could start. If I'm just starting out and I'm moving my ribs laterally, I might start to see like, oh yeah, that now my hips aren't moving as much or my knees aren't moving as much. But it's okay if everything's moving around, right? Over time, it'll improve. So I'm going to come back into the middle, and then I'm going to do that same motion, but I'm trying to be very specific in my ribs and moving. And sometimes I'll teach this where I'm just kind of moving around, and like Noah's moving around a little bit differently. It's not necessarily bad. It's just different, I think there's times that it's really good to be accurate. And then sometimes people get so wrapped up in being precise that it almost becomes unhealthy. So, you got to kind of know your personality, and in knowing yourself, you'll know how to practice better. So slow it down and then circle around in the opposite direction. So when I think of moving in space, and I don't always think of it, but when I'm moving, I'm trying to think of that I'm moving through some sort of substance, like a water, like not that it has to be a mud, but I'm moving through some form of resistance, and that's what's helping me become more knowing in how I move. And then also it's going to help me move in different ways. So if I can't necessarily move a certain way, it's more of understanding how to do that. So come back into the middle, and when you come back in the middle, just take your legs up and recross the legs, and take the left hand to the left and reach the right hand out to the right. So the muscles on the outside of the hip, the QL, can be very, very tight for you. So just let the head hang down, have the arm, rest on a block if you need it, or, if you're close to a chair or furniture, or you can rest it on someone. And then as you're resting your hand on that object, really nice in the shoulder. But just tip your body slightly forward in space. It's just a different angle. And then move it back into the middle, and maybe you can move it slightly back. Right? And all these angles can be very, very beneficial, but some angles may actually irritate you. So that's obviously not the angle that you want to be in. So bring yourself back up and then take the right hand to the right side and then reach the left hand out to the left. And it's perfectly okay if your left hip is coming off the floor. But if you want more leverage, then you'd have the hip down, and then by having the hip down, then it's going to help in exposing the left side. So you could rest your left hand on something. You could be in an overhead position, but just tip forward a little bit in space, and you'll feel more of your back stretching out. If I'm slightly leaning back, then I'm exposing more of my front. And if you're sitting on a higher surface, it's actually more advanced in some ways because it's more difficult to get lower. But eventually you'll have, a sizable stretch on the side of the body, which is Noah's in, right? So then bring yourself back up and then just take the legs into an easy squat. So wrap the arms around the legs and just push the knees out into the arms and just look on a 45-degree angle to your right. And by not looking all the way over the shoulder, it's much easier, right? But then just turn it a little bit and notice if you're turning your upper body. Not that that's bad. You got a really stiff neck, it's good to turn everything, right? As opposed to just isolating the neck. So you can turn forward and then you can look at a 45-degree angle with the head. And like I said, if it's a really big strain in the neck, it's okay to turn the torso with the alignment of the head. There's the problem with certain ways of teaching is sometimes, again, it can be a little bit rigid, and that's where people get, they're just kind of doing it the way that a tradition may teach it, which can be healthy, but sometimes it can be unhealthy. So I'm going to turn back into the middle, and I'm going to have my hands just underneath my shoulders. And I'm just isolating my shoulders. I'm just pulling my shoulders back in space, and then I'm going to relax. So retraction of the shoulders is really something that you don't get a whole lot in yoga, and it's very important to help in strengthening the shoulders. So then you can relax that, and then I'm going to pull it back in space, expose my chest, my collarbone, and then I'm going to relax. And then one more time, I'm going to pull it back. But just think of finding more width. And if you could push through the feet, and you could push through the hands, you're going to lift your hips up off the floor into a tabletop position. So as you're lifting the pelvis, draw the shoulders back, and then just move the weight side to side, which is much easier than moving forward and back. Not to say that forward and back is bad, but by moving laterally, that's if you are, right? It's good exposure into the hands, the wrists. And then bring yourself back down, take a couple deep breaths. You could wrap yourself up like you were in that squat, but you could also push down to the hands. I'm going to lift up one more time. So I'm going to come up, and then by coming up through the hips and pulling back through the shoulders, right, get more tension into the fingertips and the knuckles, and then keep the pulling back of the shoulders and bring your hips down. And then as you bring your hips down, I'm just going to come back into that easy squat again. So I'm going to push the knees out into my arms. I'm going to elevate through the upper body. Some of you may not be able to squat, which is okay, but this is a good starting point. So as you're here, just trying to create better extension. And then with extension, it's for all back bending, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my feet a little bit wider than my shoulders, and I'm going to bring my left knee out to the left. So my left leg is rotated in or out, and my right leg is rotating inward. And you could hold this, right? You could also move. So if you've never done these before, a slower approach is probably better. You could bring your hands down and then bring your legs up, and you could do it without your hands as well. You have experience with this. You could do that, but I'm getting a nice rotation through my right thigh externally, and then rotating the left thigh inwardly. And I'm a right-handed person, so my left, and it's a right-handed world, so my left hip doesn't move as it doesn't articulate as well as my right. So you might feel like the left side doesn't move as well, but it may very well be your right side. So you have a past history of some sort of injury on your right side, it may actually be more stiff. So take the legs back up, and then when you take the legs back up over to the left side, I'm going to bring my hands to the sides of me, and I'm just going to move forward with a neutral spine. So I don't want to just get down for the sake of getting down. I want to come forward to isolate the strength or the exposure in the outside of my left hip. And then bring it back up, and then when you come up, not that you have to sit perfectly over the right hip, but you could, right? Some people have experience in pain in the back knee because they lack internal rotation on the right thigh. So what you could do is post something underneath the knee. I mean, if you have your hand reaches your knee, it could be your hand, but it could be like a small towel. I'm going to come forward again, and when I come forward, what I'm trying to do is lift my left leg into my chest. So I'm bringing it in, and by bringing it in, it's going to help expose the outside of my hip more. And then I'm going to come back up, and then when I come up, I'm going to take the knees up and then bringing my knee over to the right side. And I'm keeping things even, but I say this all the time, most likely you really don't need as much practice on one side. See you later. He's got Taekwondo. So I'm going to come forward, and then when I come forward, I'm extending from my sternum. I'm isolating the outside of my hip. And then as I come forward, right, it's really a matter of when you're going further, do you need more leverage or do you need more ease? You know, that's probably the most simplistic way I can put it for people is, you know, to get forward more, you're really going to need more weight. But it's good to start out small. So I'm coming up, and then when I come up, just kind of see what it feels like to bring weight into your left hip, which is, you know, it's internal rotation, what we're going for, more on the left leg. So I'm going to come forward once again, and then as I come forward, I'm thinking of how I can lift my right leg into my chest. Not that it's coming up. You know, some people teach that, which is a perfectly good thing to use. It just doesn't have to come up for you to feel active in the leg. And then bringing yourself back up. And then when you come up, I'm going to have my legs come up, and I'm going to bring my feet into a Baddha Konasana position. So push the feet together, push the knees apart. You don't have to lift up as I am, but if you put something underneath you like a yoga block or a bolster, when you elevate, it's more stress and extension in the spine, and it's actually helping to push the thighs apart. So when someone's really, you know, quite open in the pelvis and moving the legs apart, often it's really the shape of the bones. So the bones have different density to them. So like you'll see people and they're really, really open to their legs. I mean, some of it's from practice, but often when you see someone and they can sit like very well right off the bat, you know, it's really their skeletal system. But if you feel, I'm going to bring my right hand on my right leg. If you feel like it's just tension, there is more potential that the legs will open more. And your legs don't have to open up incredibly far for it to be beneficial. It's just something we can do, right? And then I'm going to bring my right hand on my left thigh. I'm going to push into that. And what I'm doing is I'm lifting my leg into my hand. And these are quite nice up against the wall. So if you had a sofa behind you or a wall behind you, highly, highly beneficial. It's just to make it easier for all the people that are watching, a little bit easier to see as I'm just in the middle of my mat. And then I'm going to take my legs back up. As I take my legs up, I'm going to come to all fours. And as I come into all fours, I'm going to push through my hands and round my spine into a cat stretch. So looking forward, looking up, articulating through my back. And then I'm going to exhale. I'm going to round through my spine. And then I'm going to come back in the middle. I'm taking my hands over to my right side. I'm looking over my right shoulder. Just some simple stuff in between. I'm going to focus predominantly on the hips today. But it's nice to mix in other positions, and that's what I'm doing. So I'm going to take my hands to the left side. I'm going to look high over the left shoulder, trying to keep my ribs in. And that'll stretch out more of my back. And then I'm going to come back into the middle. So have your toes tucked and just sit some of your weight back into your feet. And I often say this when I'm teaching this is some people bring too much weight back and then it's obviously negative. So don't, when I say aesthetics, this would be in a yoga ad. This would not, So, it's just, I guess it's more aesthetically appeasing when someone's, in a fuller position. But, when you're practicing, you're not performing. Not that performance is bad or anything like that, but you're practicing for your own well-being, right? So I'm going to bring my hands down and then I'm going to untuck the toes and then I'm going to sit back towards the feet. And that's where group classes can be really unhealthy, where people are competing or they're trying to look like someone else. And not that that's an entirely bad thing, but you want to be practicing for your own well-being. As you get healthier, you'll certainly be able to do more, that's for sure. So come back onto your hands, and then when you're on your hands, I'm going to protract through the shoulders, and I'm going to lift up into a plank pose. So I'm lifting the knees up off the floor. I'm making the front of my body stronger and smaller. And then I'm going to come down on my knees, and then when I come down on my knees, I'm going to bring my elbows to the floor, and this could be the position. Doesn't look like much, but if you're a person that doesn't have a lot of flexibility, it's a great place to start. I'm going to reach the arms forward overhead, and then as I reach the arms forward, I'm trying to bring my ribs in just as I was in plank, and then that's exposing more of my chest and my shoulders. You could certainly bring your chest to the floor, your chin, but just for now, what I'm doing is I'm trying to make myself smaller, and I really, this is such a basic thing, but it's very, very good for your shoulders, very good for your back, in that you're learning how to extend more fully through the arms, right, through the shoulders, and then come back up. And then when you come back up, come onto the hands, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my right hand back towards my right knee. So this will help rotate the shoulder out. So for some of you, you might only be able to turn it halfway, but I'm going to turn it back where it's going to help in isolating the shoulder out. So I'm just peeling the heel of my hand up off the floor. So there's just the beginning stages, but this could be more, right? So I'm going to bring it down, and then I'm going to pull it back, right? And again, maybe you can't do this, but it's very, very progressive in adjusting the hands, the tissues in the arms, and helping you to rotate your shoulder out. And then I'm going to bring it down. I'm going to switch over to the left hand. So my left hand is turned back. And then I didn't do this on the other side, but just kind of see how the weight sits in the hand. So if the weight's kind of falling in, try to bring it more into the index finger of the hand that's turned out for you. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend my elbow, and you'll start to see and feel that the heel of the hand will come up off the floor to expose more of the forearm. Again, I'm doing maybe just 10% of what you could eventually do with this. And like I said, more isn't necessarily better. So I could do like the full version, but it may not actually help you. It could possibly hurt you. Right? So I'm going to bring the hand back, and then I'm going to have the hands underneath the shoulders, and I'm going to round through the shoulders. I'm going to take it up into our first down dog. So you can lift the knees up off the floor. You can reach back to the heels of the feet, make yourself smaller, stronger. And then I'm going to take it up into a down dog, and then in down dog, have your feet, maybe a little bit wider than you usually have the feet, and try to think that someone's pulling on the arms so that you're pulling back through your hips. So I'm moving my thighs back in space. I could, certainly bend the knees. If you're in an area that's cold today, pedal the legs out. Very, very good to do. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk the feet forward to the middle of the mat, and then I'm walking the hands back towards the feet. So I'm in a forward fold, and in a forward bend, play around with how your pelvis sits in space. So if you're just tight, you're actually in an advantage that it's just going to be a big stretch for you to be in a forward bend, right? But as I'm here, I could also be a bit active in widening my thighs and being forward over my legs. So just for a moment, bring your elbows above your knees and you're more in neutral. So this might actually be better for a lot of people. It's nice to be all the way forward and down, but for some people that lack the flexibility, this is probably a better starting point. And when you're in these positions, kind of see what's actually, what's the effect? Like what's actually, what are you exposing? For some people, it's really hard on their feet, so you can elevate the heels. For some people, it's their hamstrings. And then I'm going to come all the way forward and down just for a few breaths and see where you like to keep the weight in the feet. Do you bring it into your right foot? Do you bring it into your left? Right? I'm going to bring it into the heels, and I'm going to slowly roll myself up into a standing position. So I'm rolling up, and then as I'm standing, I'm just going to have my hands on my hips just to kind of see what I do with my pelvis. So is it easy for you to stick your butt out, or is it easy for you to bring your tailbone down? It's really one or the other for anyone. It's very rare that it's neutral, but often as people age, they get weak in their abdomen and then they start to stick out more or they start to collapse. It's one or the other, right? But I'm going to stick my butt out and be a little bit more obvious, and then I'm going to bring my tailbone down, and then I'm going to stick my butt out, and then I'm going to bring it down. And you did this in a gym, people might roll their eyes, but if you start to see yourself walking, you're really limited in the way that you walk. These are very, very important. So I wouldn't really get caught up in what people think. Again, you could do these in your house before you go for a walk. You can stick your butt out, and then you can bring your tailbone down. So depending on your history of your lower back, you may not want to really be super, super active in bringing the tailbone down. But for me, my habit is that I rely on my lower back too much in anterior tilt. So the tucking of the tailbone down is really, really beneficial for me. For you, maybe you don't need such a tuck here. And then I'm just going to relax. So I'm going to have my hands on my hips, and then I'm just going to be moving my hips laterally. Just kind of a side-to-side motion. And the knees can be bent. You don't have to have the legs straight. You could actually move the legs. Like you can see how I'm moving my knees a little bit more to move my hips. But I'm trying to just get my pelvis to move side to side. So just about 5 more reps if you can. In the hands and the hips, if you did it in front of a mirror, you can see it a little bit better, and that's something that you may need a little bit more. But now I'm going to circle the pelvis in just a circular motion. And you can see that my upper body's not moving very much at all. So I'm isolating my hips. When we're sitting on the floor, we were trying to isolate the torso to accentuate the torso, but to also, manipulate the hips. So I'm going to circle around in the opposite direction. And for some people that are stiff, it's going to look like this. You're going to just be moving around, which is okay. It's just as your body becomes more pliable, you're going to be noticing that the pelvis can move a little bit better for yourself. Right? Just to notice, simple. I'm going to side bend to the right, just side bending to the right, so my whole left side's getting exposure, kind of like what Noah and I did on the floor, but now you're standing. So use your feet, and as you use your feet, you're just basically in a side bend, so my whole left side is being adjusted here. Then bring yourself back up, and then you can side bend to the left. So this could be done passively. So like I said about, let's say you hurt, use more effort. And then say you're like, I was using effort, but you still kind of hurt, you're probably using too much. It's when I'm teaching a group class, it's, the class is really telling me what to say, how to instruct people because of what they're actually doing. So push through the feet, get into for me, it's really around the pelvis is what I'm feeling, a bit in the torso and the spine, and then bring yourself back up. And then when you're up, just turn, you're just twisting now. So I'm turning my chest, I'm turning my head, and I'm just in a very subtle twist here, just over to the right. And then I'm going to come back in the middle, and then turning my chest, turning my head. I can turn my pelvis too, but you got stuff going on in your knees, don't twist so much. Just get more into your feet, and then you can bring it back into the middle. So what I'm going to do is have my toes tucked underneath me. So my toes are tucked underneath on my left foot. And you'll probably need a wall for this, but what I'm doing is, as it gets easier for me, I can descend more through my heel. Never really flexing the toes like this. You never, unless you're doing like positions like I did on the floor. But these are much easier to do because you're standing. And if it's too much pressure, you could do it sitting in a chair. And again, it's not about torturing you. So you can untuck the toes and then bring the toes of the right foot underneath you. And then with the toes underneath, you're descending through the heel of the right foot. It's the left foot you're working on, then it's the left. But you'll see that one foot just doesn't move as well, or it possibly cramps up. But it might be that there's too much weight in the toes. So untuck the toes on the right foot, and then bring the big toe on the left foot underneath you. And I say this all the time, the more tightness you have in the feet, it carries out throughout the body. So it's okay if your feet are tight or they're stiff or whatever, but you have very tight hamstrings, it could show up in the feet. If your feet are really tight, it could possibly end up in something more serious. So even though these aren't super flashy, they're very, very effective. So you can untuck the toes, then I'm bringing the toe of the right foot underneath, and then with that underneath, you're getting more and more exposure into the joint of the big toe. So it's just the big toe that you're manipulating here. All the other toes are flat into the floor. Could be 30 seconds, could be 60 seconds. As you get more used to this, it could be multiple reps. But I think just to start out, all you really need is just about 30 to 60 seconds. So you can untuck the toe, and then I'm lifting just the toes on my left foot, just the four toes, not the big toe. And then I'm lowering them down, and then I'm lifting, and then I'm lowering, and then I'm lifting. But you'll start to see that the toes can lift up more freely. Now do it on the right side. So keep the right big toe down, but just lift every other toe up, and then bring that down, and then bring it up again, and then bring it down, and then up again, and then down. Now just lift the big toe on the left foot. So just lifting, pressing down through all the other toes, and then lowering, and then lifting, and then lowering, and then lifting. So lift it on the right side, so the right toe is lifting up, and then lowering, and then lifting, and then lowering. And then see if you can lift just the second, third, and the fourth toe on each foot. So you got to kind of grip more into the outside and the inside of the foot, and then lower that down, and then lift it again, and then lower. And you can just lift all the toes and then lower. But say you like to read, these are things you could do between chapters or before you get up and something like that. So I'm going to side bend again to the right, just isolating the outside of my left hip. So I'm going to do a forward bend after this. So if forward bending is really, really difficult, I'd stick to side bending in various ways. So take a couple deep breaths, try to lift up more through the left side, bring yourself up, side bend to the left side, so then the whole right side's getting more exposure. And you might be like, oh, I really do need more stretching or space on one side. You can certainly do that more. No one's perfectly even physically. So, and a lot of people, especially as we do get older, it'll show up as, a bit of scoliosis, most likely functional scoliosis. Not that that should worry you. And then you can bring yourself back up and then turn the chest, turn the body to the right, bring the tailbone down underneath you, just slightly. That's your tendency. Take another deep breath. Then turn it forward, turn the chest to the left, bring the tailbone down, lift through the pubis, and just see where the weight's in the feet. So bring the weight into the heels. Often people have too much weight forward in the toes. Take one more deep breath here, and then you can turn forward, and then you're just neutral.